why did I make this video? Okay, well, why I made it was because I've been fiddling around with video editing for a while, and I wanted to. I was looking for a challenge. Obviously, I wanted something different, and I had been doing those. I did that California Talk mashup, and that was kind of fun. And I had considered doing an audio mashup at one point, kind of making a remix, and I failed at it miserably. And so I just happened to hear this song one day when I was listening to my playlist of however many Gaga songs I have, and I was like, I need to make a video for that. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll do it. And so that's really what happened. I mean, I was listening to the video and listening to the song, and I said, I'm going to make this bitch. So that's what happened. On this video, I started at the walk section. I mean, it was just really relatively simple. I knew that because it was doubled, I was like, okay, well, all I have to do is take the music video, copy that part out, and then paste it twice. Line it up, I guess, whatever. But I didn't want to just play it all the way through. I was like, well, that would be boring. I don't want to make a video and just replicate everything that's visible and just cut it up in places and put it in places. I mean, it's not a puzzle; it's already put together. So this is a different thing altogether. It's a different song, even though it's using another song. So I wanted to make a different video using another video. It just so happens that the song and the videos were originated from a similar source. So I decided, okay, well, let's cut it into pieces at some point. Most of it's really just, I think, spur of the moment type stuff. It was, how do I differentiate the one thing from the other? And I was like, well, I've been playing around with it before, so I guess I'll do something easy. I'll flip the image, but flipping the image was boring, so I went into the video effects, and I was looking at the list of stuff. It's like, okay, well, I've already flipped the picture. Let's flip it another way. Let's invert the picture. So I add the invert tag on there, and I give it a quality. I'm like, okay, I like that. And that's actually when I started cutting up the other one. The other one was completely intact. And, I mean, they were both intact, but one of them was flipped and inverted. Okay, well, we don't want to just play, and then what I did was I put it in there, the normal one, and then put the other one after that, and I played it, and I was like, that's boring. I don't want just normal video and then follow it up with not so normal video. Let's mix it up a little bit. So I lined them up, and I cut them up into little pieces where they transitioned from, one shot to another, and then I was like, okay, that works. And so then I scooched it all the way to the other. I took every other segment of the others, and I was like, okay, let's drag those down here, and then let's redo that because I screwed up somewhere. Because when I did it, I don't know exactly when I did it, but it was I had been picking each every other one of the others, and so it's kind of zigzagging back and forth. Drug it all out there, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's something screwed up here. So I'm like, undo, go back, and figure it all out. So, and then that was the easy part of that. That probably took about 20 minutes, actually. Even though it was easy, it was just, it was relatively time-consuming. The harder part, I think, was when it starts to extend out and repeat itself. And, then it adds in the bridge where she's saying, I want, and, she's sticking her hand out. Well, actually, I flipped that video around, too. There's only, 4 of those? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. There's 4 of those. I reversed the imagery on 2 of them, but I kept them their normal coloration. And then on the other one, I left it normal progression, so instead of the video being reversed, it's still normal progression. But I just gave it the black and white filter because I guess it kind of matched the sort of inversion thing that was going on here. The crazy one was like figuring out what to do when when she's repeating baby, or yeah, I'm a free bitch baby, when she's repeating the last syllable of baby over and over and over and over again, I was like, well, I gotta mix that part up just a little bit too. And then I had to squeeze shit together, and I would alternate between inverted and normal color, and then every like third I flipped the picture. Looks like, I think. No, I had it flipped mostly, and every third I actually put the picture back normally. So it, even though it's the same image being, or the same few pieces of time, if you will, being constantly repeated, the imagery is fluctuating relatively quickly. So you've got every other one of them is inverted, but most of them are flipped backwards, and then every now and again you get one that's not flipped backwards. So on the rare occasion you actually get one that's the right video look. It's not flipped and it's not inverted. So I think that helped create a bit of variety in there, I suppose. Obviously there's the invert one. On here it blends from normal to the opposing negative color. The further you go to the middle, the more white it is for some damn reason. I don't know why. I guess that's just the process of inversion, because what you're doing is you're going from one set of colors and then you're slowly transitioning to the opposite color. So I guess at some point you're going to reach 0, and then it's going to go back into the negative. So there you go. I guess that makes perfect sense. Now that I think about it, one of the things that was actually completely accidental, that I started using a little more frequently toward the end of it, was a combination of 3 things. One of them is the chroma keyer. Now I don't really know what that is, but it adds a screen effect apparently, and I guess what it's doing is it's removing certain colors of the red, green, blue, and it's basically saying, okay, when we have a pure red screen, we're getting rid of the green and the blue, and we only have red in the background, sort of an added layer, I suppose. And if you'll notice, especially when she's dancing in the red outfit, it looks really, really red. I mean, it's contrastingly red, but it's not just because of that effect, because when you do that, it enhances it somewhat, but it doesn't fully enhance it. I went in and I found something else, because I wanted some color effects. I kept adding all of these different visual effects, but I wanted some sort of color effect. And so I found 2 of them called color correctors. One of them is color corrector, the other one is color corrector secondary. So I was fiddling with them, and I just was using presets because I was getting kind of lazy at this point. It was toward the end, and I was kind of tired, and I wanted to see what I could pull out of my ass just from just fiddling with presets. And so I scrolled from like one of them's computer red, green, blue to studio red, green, blue, and I was like, that didn't really do anything. And then I flip it over to studio red, green, blue. I mean, well, actually, the first one does a little bit. It's kind of like softens it a little. But then, like, switching over to the studio to computer, I was like, holy crap, it cleared it up a bit, and then the colors just kind of stood out. I was like, wait a minute. If it does that on that one, let's check out this other one. And so it's like, okay, blurry a little bit. Bam! It's like it adds a little color contrast instead of brightness contrast. And so in those, especially in the ones where you get close-ups of her and her lipstick, not the very close ones, but like, okay, when the scene where she's wearing with the fire in the background at the bed, her lipstick is really, really red, and her flesh tones have been increased in a reddened sense, so it's almost like she's, I think in a way, and even though this is not something I was thinking of, it's as if it's enhanced the fact that she's supposed to have been getting it on just recently in the visuals at that point. I used the same ones, same effects, that keyer and the correctors, on that major portion in the middle before the big static screw up. I added those as well. Initially, I added something called a color curve, and it was on a preset called Night. I noticed with this particular sort of choreographed scene that was going on, when I added the chroma keyers, the blue screen seemed to stick out most, and it was strange that it would do that. Although now I look at it and it seems that, well, in a way it's funny, because if you go to the green screen one, in some portions of it there's a more bluish tinge, but in other areas it's kind of purplish. So I guess it's all dependent upon the lighting, of course. I mean, that's really why these effects work the way they do. But this night effect sort of darkened it and made it bluer. And I initially had it in there, but I had it in other places, and so I didn't want to overload it. And that spot I felt was just too dark because with that night effect, and so I just decided to take it out of that one spot, and I left it in some of the other ones. Let's see, other effects that I added. Oh, some of the ones I really liked. Now I'm not going into the big ones yet. I'm just going on to some individual stuff, because within each little section there are certain shots. There's one where she's staring at the mirror and talking to herself. I do that every night. It's not strange at all. And that was one of the first sort of different effects that I found. That one is called When It Loads. What's wrong with you retard? Come on. Okay, here we go. I used some contrast, brightness and contrast, and I think I used a preset. No, actually I didn't. I called it Untitled. Going through the presets on here, actually, the first thing I did was I went to the Fill Light preset. Okay, that's not right. Oh, never mind. One thing I fucking loved. This was a total accident, mind you. Alright? If you go in about 1:44, she's laying on the bed, alright? And then, right when her bra sparks, the other stuff just disappears. Now, in a way, it was sort of intentional, but it wasn't intentional on the timing, not on how it all went down. When her bra sparked, I wanted all the stuff to disappear, all the other effects that were there, except for one. I left one effect in there the whole way, and that's called interlacing, and that's the sort of horizontal lines that are across the imagery. I wanted to keep that one in there, but what I was doing was I had it where it was diminishing the whole time until it hit a certain point. But most people are likely not to notice that because it's a persistent transition. I had it to where certain things would happen, and the overall effect that I'm talking about is called the TV simulator, and it has all these different aspects. There's detail zoom. That any details that are on there, it zooms it in, so it basically makes it larger for the screen. Something called aperture grill, which adds a grid function to it. It gives it some mostly, well, yeah, I mean, it adds vertical and horizontal lines. The interlacing, like I said, is those horizontal lines. The more prominent those are, the bigger, deeper, dark lines show up, and it shows some screwiness, obviously. I'm going to go ahead and undo all of those. There's two effects called line sync and vertical sync. The line sync, the worse it is, the worse the horizontal is, and it seems wavy. I mean, it's horribly wavy, too. Whereas the vertical sync causes it to scroll up and down. It's as if each of the frames are off track. They're not properly synced up, obviously. But anyway, getting back to that point, the minute 44, the way I had all those TV effects set up, I wanted the bra spark to turn it off, essentially. And then this one was really fun because I had to time, or at least I wanted to, time each of the sparks to an appropriately corresponding beat. Now, I measured the number of beats and I measured the number of sparks, and there were more beats than there were sparks. So I had to do a little bit of adjusting, and I had some space left over, but I was fine with that because I expected that. But on that first spark, the phasing. Oh, I didn't go through all that. There's something called scan phasing, and that's that white line that constantly progresses over it. It in a way, it's kind of annoying, I would hope, because that's the point of it. When her bra sparks for the first time, it's right on top of her bra, and then bam! It's like it's set it off, and then it all disappears. I mean, and I had no idea how to time that, and it was completely. I mean, that was a complete fluke, and I was like, "What?" I had to rewatch that like 10 times just to see that, and basically piss my pants with happiness because that was awesome. There's also another effect called phosphorescence, which basically adds like a bluish tinge. It can get really blue too. And then there's static. That should be kind of obvious. It's, white noise is schlook. I didn't really add that into a lot of stuff. I added it into the beginning, obviously. Right before that too, before she was on the bed, I had a gap. That gap was actually kind of hard to fill because I didn't really know what I wanted to put into it. And I had already had the first chorus, and if I'm not mistaken, I already had. Or no, I had the first. Hold on a sec. How to mute these? Yeah, we already had the first chorus and the first verse, of course. And so it progressed into this, just sound effects, and there were no lyrics. I'm like, okay, what the hell am I going to put in here? Well, the first thing I ended up putting in there was the bed, because what I did was, for, if you will, inspiration for sections within it, I went back to the initial video. I was like, okay, what sets me off? What says this could sync up, or what says this is interesting and could apply to the sound effects that I'm listening to? In this one, it had the persisting beats and the sort of tinkling, synthesizing sounds. In fact, that sort of tinkling, synthesizing sound, it reminds me of, if you will, in a way like electronic rain. It's almost as if it's the way it's repeating itself, and the sensation I get from it, it kind of reminds me of rain. And so that's why I added that scan phasing stuff. Granted, it didn't work exactly like I wanted it to, because I don't know how to properly tweak that, because there are sometimes where it scrolls upwards. But I figured, in a way, with everything else already having gone, people may or may not know that it's going up or down. It's just that they're going to be aware of this fucking white thing is just constantly scrolling, and it's, changing speeds and stuff. And so I don't know. I don't know how detailed, how much attention to detail people have in general, but I personally didn't care. I was like, it's still there, and it still provides that effect. It still provides that sort of light, electronic sort of washing over you sort of thing. I lost my train of thought. I guess you could call it a science fiction-y feel. This one ended up being the way it was, mostly because of just spur-of-the-moment design. I didn't start off at the walk and say, okay, I'm going to screw with the colors and everything, and then from there on out, we're just going to do, hey, your TV's screwed up. It was, when I did that, I wanted to kind of maintain a similar aspect of stuff. I wanted to give it something to say, okay, we're not going to be completely different in how we're doing it. Now, granted, most of these effects, I mean, they kind of do maintain the concept of screwing with things, but because of what I was using, because of the visuals, because of the Lady Gaga video, I wanted to take whatever I took from that, whatever it was that I thought of. You say that it's a virtual thing, and I never really considered that, to be honest, because I consider all music videos, in some sense or another, if you will, to have that aspect. It's not realistic. It's not based on reality. Some of them, yes, are. There's the Teenage Dream by Katy Perry recently. It's very realistic looking. The production values, well, shit, from what I can tell. I mean, in a way, the video is actually really boring. And I think maybe because of my exposure to Lady Gaga, I've come to that conclusion. Obviously it tells a story, and that's what all videos do. I think that's why people make a music videos, because they want to tell a story on some sense or another. It's obviously individually dependent upon what story the individual sees. Just like with any other piece of art. So it's all interpretation, really. I understood that there was a connection between the content of the song and the video. Granted, the video skewed that concept a bit. From what I can tell, aside from the introduction when she's got her finger on the button and lets go of it, and then the video actually starts, when the video actually starts, we see the bathhouse of Gaga, and you got these what look to be caskets with little monsters. It says monster on there, and little cross, screwed up crosses. And so, take away from it whatever you want, but the way I'm seeing it is that she's emerging out of this very white container. She herself is dressed in a massive amount of white. She can't see, she can't hear because she's got those covered up. She can only smell, taste, touch, and speak and whatnot. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of birth related. But, and with the white and all that, there's the purity concept, and I was like, okay. And, there's a sense of sensory deprivation as well. Some of this information that I'm providing you has also been provided to me, and it just sort of filled in some gaps, I guess, for the most part. It looks like she's, and then it, sort of transitions over, and, she's in a little bathtub, but she's got big-ass eyes. I'm like, okay, the first thing I thought of was wide-eyed, and I'm like, that's innocence, though. When one is wide-eyed, it means they're innocent, and so it's like, okay, we've transitioned from a concept that looks like birth to innocence. This looks like some form of growth, some sort of progression from being, naive and innocent to perhaps worldly and even powerful. And it ends up that she is relatively powerful. And that actually is pretty common, too, in music videos. The person of focus is usually one who possesses the most power in whatever scenario is being provided. She shows in this video, it's like, okay, she's born into the world. Looks like, in a way, she's born into captivity almost, because she's in this very small room. It's very dark. And at times, she seems very insecure. Noting that point, at just about 50 seconds, she goes from dancing around in the room to standing there, kind of squatted down on the ground, and in my video, it's very dark, and so I'll go ahead and pull up those effects. There's actually only two effects that I used. I used a black and white effect, and I used a brightness and contrast effect. And I tweaked, I basically took the black and white and I said, okay, let's put this 100% black and white. And then I said, okay, with the brightness and contrast, I'm going to tweak it. And I ended up giving it a concept I call sad dark. Because the way I saw her in that crouched over position, in some of the, and correlating that to the lyrical content and some of the utterances that were happening, I was like, kind of seems like she might be a little lonely or insecure. And I said, okay, well, let's take that concept and let's make it worse. let's not expand on it. Let's concentrate on that. And so I wanted to provide as much dark as I could. And I was like, well, okay, color is not going to help. But, you know, keeping to the idea of visual changes, I didn't want to just keep it like that. And since she kind of repeats that little utterance a few times, I was like, okay, well, let's repeat the image a couple of times. And then, you know, I did a little bit of tweaking here and there, and I flipped 2 of them and left 1 at the normal. And then I realized, after I did that Kesha Alejandro mashup, I realized that adding like 1 or 2 frames of just nothing can create that snap beat effect. It can enhance the beats and whatnot. So I went in here and I was like, okay, well, let's find a spot and just cut 1 little frame out, and it just happened to work out the way it is here. Oh, the outro, the exit, if you will. The last minute and a half has, I think, the least amount of time spent on it overall when it comes to creative process. It's more technical than anything else. Especially, I'll tell you where it starts, in my opinion, when it comes to the creative exit. It is right when at 4 minutes 42 seconds, it scrolls out of a repeated version of that of when she popping her hand down, but it extends a little bit further, and you get a close-up, and it's darker. It's like, well, why didn't you use that? Because that's not what was used in the video. And one thing I did want to do throughout the whole video was maintain a similar progression from beginning to end, like the original video. Because first of all, the song it maintained a similar progression, and I thought, well, you know, this is really more or less just a test to see what I can do. So I don't want to go crazy. In a way, I actually prefer doing it like this because it's still challenging anyway. Now, maybe 10 or 15 videos down the line, I won't give a shit, and I'll try something different. But starting at 4 minutes, 42 seconds, she's in the red outfit, it's close up, and she's got a peace sign, and she's covering her eye up. I thought, okay, we're getting to an ending, and that's actually right about where she ends in the video. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to create something a little different. Well, at the end of her video, the following progression at one point, this is reversed, mind you, what you're seeing. The lights are turning on. Well, at the end of her video, the lights are turning off. When the lights turn off, it switches over to the bed. You know, the tits are sparking. There's a corpse on the bed. The bed's fried. You know, she's in a black outfit. God, that ass, man. That ass! Woo! Anyway, when I saw that for the first time, I was like, holy shit, this bitch has got a sweet ass. Anyway, back on track, I suppose. Are we now? Anyway, at the end with this red transition, or with this red outfit, instead of having it turn the lights off and sort of repeat what she was doing, I wanted to switch it up just a little bit, but still maintain a sort of ending theme, if you will. And so the lights are turning on, and then the following scene was not actually where it was initially. I wanted the lights to turn on, and then all of the other effects to turn off. And that's what happens. I've got a little keyframe here. If I go into that, everything else is basically done. It goes from the final frame of her, of all the lights turning off, and her standing there, to the next, and it's got a few tiny little attributes to these features because I wanted it to progressively reduce. I only found that it does that after, putting it at a 0 point and noticing the frame prior to that, it was like severely reduced from the beginning. I was like, oh, so it automatically reduces. I didn't know that. So the very next frame, everything is where it's supposed to be, except for the fact that on this one, I actually gave it its own unique qualities of having that sort of TV effect. But skipping that for the moment, initially it didn't look like that. Initially, all it was just black and white, and that's actually reversed footage. Well, what I did was I took it and I doubled it the length of time, and it's closing. I was like, okay, I had that at the very, very, very end. What I did was I had the outro as it is, all the way down. Even when she takes her finger off the button and it goes to static again. Initially, I had it to where the static was at max original volume and then it faded out because the staticky visual effects also were fading back out, and that little scene where the little boxes are now closing is what happened. That was the very end of the original video, the way I had initially had it planned. And it stayed that way for a really long time, but then for whatever reason I just decided not to do that. Oh, I know why. I wanted to give that little section where it's really dark. Let's progress toward the beginning at about 37 seconds. Just actually about 38 seconds in. It's when they're dancing around and you've got that little static effect going on, and it also has that, the vertical sync and the line sync are slightly out. They're only off by like 5%, but if you notice, for that brief, exactly 2-second period, that's surprising, it's pretty significant that, you can see the little waviness going on. There's not a whole lot of static going on, but it's enough to be obvious. I black and whited out that entire spot. What I wanted to do is for every section that retained similar video footage, I wanted to keep the same visual characteristics throughout the entire video. So no matter where they were placed, I wanted them to maintain the same visual characteristics. And so, like right beforehand, at 37 seconds, it's this very white scene where her eyes are just like dark. I wanted, because she's staring at you, I was like, I want more enhancement on her eyes because I want to creep the fuck out anybody who's watching this right now. I want them to feel uncomfortable when she's staring at them. And so I went in here and I added that fill light effect. What's funny is I added it after the one prior where she's staring at herself in the mirror. I was like, well, let's see what I can do with this fill light thing, because I liked what that did. And so I dropped it down to sort of a bluish look, sort of pastel blue almost. And, I was fiddling with it and all that, and I found it. I didn't have the brightness and contrast on. And so adding in that blue, I was like, that actually is kind of creepy, but let's go ahead and let's add in something else. And I don't know about you, but I think it's kind of creepy looking. Matter of fact, actually I messed with it later just to screw with it. I added a bit of contrast. Right about 38 seconds. She's sitting in a little bathtub. She's looking at you. Mocking you. If I drop the contrast, the brightness down like slightly, it actually looks like she's a grayling. It's just that you don't see anything but her face. I mean, just the dark spots on her eyes and her mouth. Now, I probably didn't do something of that nature because I still wanted, some visual characteristics of the woman. But had I considered that, I actually was messing around with this after I had posted it, and I was doing this, and I was like, if I had thought of that a long time ago, I would have done it, because she's almost virtually non-existent, except for like a few basic features, and she kind of looks like a grayling, and I was like, that would be really cool. It's like, holy shit, she's a fucking alien. I mean, her nose basically disappears, it's just like white. Now, knowing full well what was going on in this particular scenario, there was going to be some interaction between her and some other women. And so I was like, okay, this is actually different than when she's staring at you. Even though the scene is the same for the most part, what's going on is different. So I wanted to add something different. So I added this effect. I was just fiddling around with stuff. And it's called soft contrast. Now, because soft contrast has a lot of features to mess with, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to worry a whole lot about it. So I went with some presets that are available. One is called Window Shades. And I pretty much kept it the way it is. I think I strengthened it a bit or something, but for the most part, I kept it where it's at. Because I did adjust its positioning just so it could accommodate everything that was going to go on. Because like I said, I wanted to maintain it throughout every situation where she was sitting in the bathtub and for the most part was not trying to interact with the audience. But, like I said, following that particular scene, we then get into the dancing with the staticky phasing problems. But then, something that perhaps contradicts what I just said earlier, where she's not interacting with the audience. She's kind of looking around. She's not interacting with you. And then all of a sudden, she does. She focuses in on you. Well, I decided to just mess around a little bit and use that other effect where when she actually starts looking at you, the first second she looks at you, I was like, okay, bam, we're going to put those other characteristics in there. We're going to get the fill light, we're going to get the brightness and contrast, maintain the same effects, and bam, it looks like that, and it's still creepy. And then, immediately following it, I still use the same effects, but oh well, whatever, fuck. Apparently they're relatively similar, but for whatever reason, one minor change made it really bright looking. And I can't figure out exactly what it is, but whatever. It doesn't look like anything's really that much different, but I actually stuck with what I was doing, and while she's not interacting with the audience, while she's still looking away, she still maintains that sort of window shade. Hey, I'm looking at you and watching you, and I'm being creepy. And then the moment her eyes land on you, it's like, bam, we switched over to that creepy mode. And then I actually I took several pieces of it and I made alternating reversals. So it kind of is really creepy because her head's kind of bobbing back and forth slightly. I mean, I don't know about that for you. I mean, it doesn't really scare me, but I think the idea behind it is kind of weird and it's creepy. And I like the fact that it does that because it's neat. Because it's fucking with your head. And that's really the whole concept of it all, is this is all supposed to screw with your head. Because just like, and I think that's the main reason why when I saw TV Simulator and I saw what it could do, I was like, I gotta put that in there somewhere. And I ended up putting it in the whole video, of course. Because I wanted the whole experience. I had to have a theme, obviously, because, you know, why the fuck am I gonna make this thing if I don't have a theme? and the theme is the special effects. And so I realized that doing this, adding in these TV effects and these other things, kind of enhanced what it was she was doing. But, you know, my first response to her video was, what the fuck did I just watch? But it wasn't really like, oh my god, that was horrible, or oh my god, that was just so stupid and weird. It was like, there are obvious reasons why I think I should be somewhat, I was just perplexed, I guess, because I wasn't expecting something of that nature. You know, you just don't see that kind of video footage these days. But at the same time, it was like, I don't know what I just watched, but I like it. It was weird, and I like it. And then now I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with me. It's like, okay, it was weird. I like it. Okay, what's wrong with you, dummy? And so, I guess after listening to the song and sort of adding a few effects here and there, I just kind of, when I saw TV Simulator and I saw what I could do, I was like, okay, we got to do what we can with this. And the intro is where I actually really used it. Not, if you will, to its fullest extent, but more or less to, as, I guess as a way to test it out, to sort of see what all I could do with it, and to see if it really fit. And it did. It really did fit. The intro, what's funny is I noticed a few times here and there, especially in the areas of high repetition, the intro, of course, the walk, right at, starting at 2:23, yeah, she's repeating romance over and over and over again. And then it gets to a point and she simply says caught the whole time. It repeats like a motherfucking bat out of hell. The cool thing about that, well, as I was going to say, in regards to some of the repetition, I found that when I took certain pieces and found different repetitions of those statements, you know, whether it was caught in a bad romance, whether it was romance, whatever, there were only like a few of them within the video itself. And then when I would double it, it pretty much fit right where it belonged in this remix. I was like, okay, the person who made this remix, in a way, was not that original. Repeating it as many times as they did in so many ways. But now, I didn't find all of them, obviously. I only found so many of them. And in the intro, I think I found about 4 or 5 different sections. I'm not really going to count them because going into this is really, really, like, there's a lot of meticulousness involved here. It wasn't really hard making it all. I mean, I just had to find the certain things, sync them up properly. Syncing, in a way, is kind of difficult because you have to listen really, really closely and then adjust, and then replay it, and then adjust, and replay it. And then, fortunately, because it's looped, they probably used FL Studio to loop. I will probably never use that. To me, I just can't create the proper organization in my mind. But they loop all there's obvious loops in here, and knowing that it does repeat made it easier to do things like the intro and other sections, because then I can be like, okay, each of these pieces are this amount of time long, and the beats are this amount of time long. I got to do just a little bit of math, and I'm good, because I'm good at math. It wasn't that hard to then, you know, create the proper progressions, and then, you know, a little tweaking here and there, and making it not too obvious, and then we end up with the intro. But I initially didn't have it to where it had the static. When I saw the TV Simulator had the static effect, I used an effect called glow. It's only on the images when when it's real close to her face, when you just get those super huge close-ups. And I used something called white highlights, and it's just really cool. It just it just made her face really, really bright, but it still maintained color. So it's like, okay, that's kind of like a nice contrast adjustment or whatever. So you can still see her green eyes, which is one reason why I like her. But then, like, at another point in this, because I wanted some adjustment, I kept the glow effect as it was, but then I took invert, brought it all the way up to 1, and I was like, holy crap, that looks awesome. It's just like solid black for the most part with, like, you know, some white highlights, but because it's inverted, it's not black and white. There's actual color in there. It's just really hard to see because all of those scenes are really, really brief. That sprinkling diamond scene, I took the concept of, I took that sad dark preset that I made, and I just simply added it, and it made a really cool look. I mean, there was, like I said, there was a lot of accidents involved in this. You know, some things were very specific in how I did it, but then I duplicated it in other areas, and it created a really cool effect. And so it's like, okay, well, that actually kind of works on me, because, you know, I'm using a lot of simple things to make something that looks relatively complex. I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you anyway. Prior to that, when it's constantly repeating romance, 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 and she's like flipping her head to the side and whatnot, this was my least creative time in the entire video. I told myself that I wasn't going to just start throwing shit in there, but this was pretty much the one time I did it. I took several areas where, you know, in the backtrack of the original video and in, you know, some spots where she was actually saying it. You know, initially I was going to have her in the red outfit, and I was just going to repeat it as many times as I could. I was like, no, that's too lazy. I got to do a little bit more work. So I took those other 3 sections with her dancing around while she's naked, one where she's dropping the cloth, the other one where she's kind of dancing around with the backup dancers, you know, doing what looks like the twist, and just adding different effects to shit. And, you know, this one was really more of a test scenario to see what kind of extra shit I could put on it. And, you know, I liked some of the output, but it's the only, this is how I can, I think, justify it. I shouldn't have to, but I'm going to try. Because at this point I had already had the Outer Limits idea in my head, because I didn't even think of that in the beginning. I was probably like 90% done when I thought, someone's fucking with my TV. And I'm like, wait a minute, I've heard that before. And I said, there's nothing wrong with your television. But I didn't say that. I actually said, there's something wrong with your television. And then I was like, wait, there's nothing wrong with your television. Where did I get that from? I was just searching my mind. I was like, that's the Outer Limits intro. So what did I do? I went online and I looked it up. Because I'm lazy. And I was like, holy crap, that fits. It fucking fits. It's perfect. But obviously not everything. Because I was like, your TV is fucked up. I want you to know your TV is screwed up. But then I wanted to take it back, because I was like, your TV's screwed up. You need to go throw that fucker away and go get another one. Then I was like, how do I, like, justify that behavior, right? It's like, you know what? My bad. Your TV wasn't screwed up. Sorry, you just wasted money, dick. Thus making me look like a dick. And I felt that that was perfect. I had already added the static sound effect. I actually created the static sound effect in a program called Audacity, which I'm using to record right now. And there's a generate, and it says generate silence, tone, or white noise. I'm like, really? White noise? That's awesome. I have to generate white noise. So I generated white noise. And I was like, all right, let's see what we can do with this TV thing. And so I had it fix itself and be relatively clean in that intro. And then at the very end, I had it, and remember, I had the caskets closing. Well, at that point, like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but at the very end of that spot where the lights were going on, where they were turning on, right at that point, I wanted all of the other effects to turn off. All of them. Then the entire TV simulator was going to be off. But that's only because I realized that at the very end, I threw in that intro, or her intro, and put it on the outro. Because I was like, how do I end this video? I need to figure out how to end it. I was already in the middle of it. I mean, doing some things. I had already added some things here and there, and I was like, the ending is interesting. It slows down somewhat. It's relatively calm by comparison. The actual audio track doesn't have nearly as much noise going on. I mean, it's not nearly as full. And I was like, you know what? I need something relatively calm, but I need something that kind of fits that techno-ish sound. So I start up the video of Bad Romance. I'm like, oh, hey, I have my intro. I have my outro. This is fucking perfect. I mean, I started it, and the first thing I saw was her sitting in the chair with a finger on the button. I was like, yep, that's it. It was totally no-brainer. And then I was like, wait, she takes her finger off the button. That could be the end. She could turn the video off. Instead of like in the beginning where she turns a little song off on hers, in mine, she could just turn the fucking video off, turn the sound off and everything. I was like, that's perfect. And then I was like, it's close to perfect. Then I added the idea of the static, and I was like, this is working out to be really cool. I had the static in the outro before I had it in the intro. The very initial one was just, it kind of trails off, and then it was like, I gotta add a little bit more to it. And then I added the little caskets closing, and then I moved those back. I like where they're positioned, because very, very soon, as the lights are turning, if we progress backwards, as the lights are turning off now, and then she has that V over her eye. Right before that, this was actually filler, and this is when I changed the positioning of the caskets closing. Was that repeated spot where she's like, she throws her arm down, and then she moves forward, and it kind of gets that, she's got the monster claws going on, and she looks all, like, dark and mysterious, and I was like, you know what? When I added that in there, I was like, I don't know why, I still have yet to literally pinpoint the reasoning why I considered this, but I felt like moving it because I felt like it was a good way to end. Like, having that extra content where it was felt right. I don't know why. And I think maybe it was because prior to that, at about 4 minutes, 27 seconds, I used part of the intro of her original video. In fact, this is one of the very few pieces of video that are almost completely untouched. Like, this track has absolutely no effects to it whatsoever other than global effects. And really, I think there are only a few, there are a few tiny little sections here and there, but there's actually one toward the beginning that maintained this throughout all of it, and that was... Where the hell are you? I'm looking for a spot that I was talking about. Okay, the first time you see her dancing around in the room and the lights are all on and she's in the white outfit, it's at about 1:06. Give it 1:07. Well, if I turn the global effects off, this is the first time in the video where I did not add any visual effects to the individual track. So every time you see her dancing around in the white outfits with the backup dancers in the really bright room, the only effects that are going on are the global ones. And I did that on purpose. I don't remember why I did it on purpose, though. But one thing I did do is, like I said, I wanted to maintain certain aspects throughout the whole thing. Every time you got repeated notes or repeated verb, let's say right at minute like 4, when she changes her, when she's starting to look, she's looking away, and then she looks at you, and then it does that, it breaks off and starts doing that heavy repetition. At that point, I don't know if you noticed this or not, but the other effects aren't on. Well, the global effects aren't on. When the intro finishes, it cleans itself up a bit, and then there's a real brief point where there's some distortion and some static and whatnot. The phasing kind of comes on, and it's all the screwed up phasing happens, and there's little caskets in the background and whatnot, and so there's some static and there's some syncing out of it's out of sync. Well, then it cleans itself up real quick, and she's talking to herself in the mirror, and it's kind of lavenderish, and her favorite color is lavender. That's kind of why I picked that color, by the way. When it cleans up, those major effects turn off, and the only thing that's there is the interlacing. And during major sections of the video, especially in the verses, I wanted to maintain the lack of the TV simulator effect, because I wanted to give it a sense of order, if you will. Even though each frame is all screwy in of itself, you don't have a totally messed up TV. You don't have these lines constantly blasting through and altering stuff and just screwing with you. You're like, damn it, I wish that shit would go away. So you have individual effects, and I think that's actually where I decided to maintain certain effects for certain visual areas, because I wanted to give it a bit more interest. The walk scene is when it turns off as well. Granted, right before the walk, there's a huge situation of distortion. That was a hard one to fill in for a while, because I just didn't know what the hell to do. So I had a gap for a while. It was just full of technological sound. And then to get an idea of maybe how to do it, I decided to watch the video again, of course, because that's what I was doing. And the first time when watching, the first thing I noticed when I was watching her video is when you're listening, and it goes to and it intros the bathhouse of Gaga on the glass, and all the stuff's in the background. I was like, there's kind of an electrostatic-y sound going on. That might work. And so I just kind of entered it in there, and I was like, wait a minute. Let's screw the TV up again. We haven't done that in a while. We haven't totally screwed stuff up. And I was like, wait, that would be perfect. That would go so well with the audio. And so, skipping to, what is it? Skipping to 317. It's the end of the little dance thing, and it kind of has that sound to it. And I was like, you know what? This kind of works. I need to screw up some video. So what I did was, I took the amount of time there was in that section. What I initially did was I cut the short amount of time that is incorporating the bathhouse of Gaga. It's 2 seconds and 8 frames, so I cut it right in half to 1 second, 4 frames, and I scooched the second half to the other end. And then I added in those other, I took that amount of time that was there, and I was like, okay, divide that by 4, and then find sections of that length in the other video, and insert them in randomly or whatever. And so it was all good. Then I was like, when I when I was watching some of the it's the pre-rendering of it. What you can do in the Sony Vegas is when you have something selected, you can go down, you can right-click on the bar up at the top, and you can say selectively pre-render video. And when you do that, it gives you the option of pre-rendering as whatever format. So I just use it as AVI. And when it's finished doing that, it plays it just like an actual video instead of having some of the skips and stuff because of your program. It takes care of all of the technicalities just in that tiny little piece. Well, when I pre-rendered it, I was like, the Bathhouse of Gaga stuff, it doesn't look like it has enough exposure. There's the amount of time that's there before all the staticky shit goes on, it just doesn't seem like it's enough to get you to notice that this is actually happening. It's like she finishes the dance routine, let's see, she does the little cross thing, and all of a sudden we got the Bathhouse of Gaga, and then now it's all staticky and shit. I didn't want to do that, so instead what I did was I recombined, if you will, the images. I gave it its full length, and then I simply duplicated it at the beginning and the end. And then toward the end of the first section, I simply merged the video. I took the pieces that were already there, and I simply merged them over each other. There's actually a term for that. It's called crossfading. And basically, they just cross over from one to another, and they fade slightly as well. Well, those were pieces that I didn't actually affect with local special effects. I just used those global effect for that section. I actually gave a specified global effect. Like I've been doing for the cleanup areas, I gave this one a super dirty mess up. And I felt that it was actually very appropriate. What'd you think about it anyway? Well, there's that section right before the walk where it's real dirty and just staticky and shit. I like I said, I did that intentionally because I felt like it was really appropriate for the sound effects that were going on, and I just tweaked it a little bit, and it was really fun. That was one of the hardest places to fill, but when I got that idea, it was the easiest thing to do in the world. I mean, it took almost no time. Because, really, it's funny, now that I think about it, the hard thing about doing all of this isn't the technical aspects. It really isn't. I mean, fitting things here and there, and that's not the hard part. The hard part is figuring out what to put there. I'm kind of surprised at that, actually. You would think with the amount of time that I've been putting into this that this would be something that's difficult to do. It really isn't difficult for me to do this stuff, and that's probably why I like doing it, because once I figure out what to put there, it's like, bam, I'm getting shit done now. That's an interesting lesson learned about myself. Oh, but I never finished talking about the goddamn outro. Well, prior to the outro, the lights are turning on while she's standing there and whatnot. But then, in the finished video, we have the caskets closing. And I was like, wait, I just turned the lights on, and the caskets are closing. And then I connected something that I didn't previously connect about her video. In that area, when she's doing the initial dancing and whatnot, it's actually really dark. For whatever reason, it didn't click. I mean, obviously, there's the lighting of the situations, and, the lights get brighter and brighter and all that, and then she's in the full-on white outfit, all the fucking lights are on, dancing around and stuff. But for some reason, I just didn't make that connection. I don't think it's stupid, I just think it's my brain just somehow doesn't do that for some reason. But for whatever reason, I had never connected the fact that, these scenarios, it was really dark in these areas. And I was like, that's more fitting than I thought it was. Because now, because the lights are turning on, they're getting back in their little boxes. And so, in a way, the end of my video is introing into hers. Because there's actually some backwards progression at the end of my video that's forward, that otherwise would be forward progression in the beginning of her video. There's obviously the fact that I use her intro as my outro. But I mean, I think those are just a lot of coincidences, to be honest. I mean, granted, the outro was like, oh yeah, this is fucking perfect. You know, we're turning the video off. That's awesome. And then you said something, what was it about, the video wouldn't exist or something without itself or some shit like that? When you said that, it kind of clicked in my head. I had already considered something of that nature, but yet again, I didn't really fully realize it. That at the end of the video, because when you watch this on loop, I didn't really intend it to happen this way, but then I tweaked it to happen this way. When you watch it on loop, it's almost like the video does what you're talking about. She turns the video off and it goes to static, and then when you watch the beginning, it loops over to the beginning again, it all happens again, and then she's turning it off again. You know, she's turning off the, if you will, she's turning off the clarity of the video. And so it goes with the motif of it being controlled by an outside source. She's controlling it from an inside source to a degree, but something hasn't explained how the outside source is controlling it. And that's when I already had the idea that I was going to loop it, because I watch shit all over and over anyway. I do everything over and over. That's probably why I can do this, because I can do stuff repetitively as long as it interests me. You know, to be honest, I really can't figure that part out. I think it was just sort of a combination of sort of eureka moments, and it worked out to be really awesome. And I could be going too far into it, if you will, you know, overthinking it, as they say. But the concept is there, and the idea is there to be overthought. And so because of that, it's a quality that can exist. And I'll go ahead and let it exist, because I like it. It's fun for me. But, I mean, there's all these little tiny different things that I added in here, and oddly enough, the overall motif of the video fits. You know, there are tiny sections within, you know, just like I said when I started on the walk section. You know, I started on that. Well, what is it? I mean, it's basically just screwed up television, right? Well, it kind of is. I mean, maybe that's just because my mind was working in that direction. You know, I wanted to give it a screwed up theme. I don't know. Whenever there's a lot of repetitive stuff, especially when it condenses itself and then it cleans itself up at the very end, well, I took that into consideration. I was like, okay, sonically, like at the end of the walk scene, well, it's clean, but except for its, you know, weird effects on its own, it doesn't have the overall TV's global effect. They only have their own little normal effects. And then at the end of all of that insanity, it clicks back on with the TV simulator. So what I was thinking, after I inserted those visuals and I played it back, I was like, the visuals and the audio, the sonic qualities and the visual qualities are in fact affecting the proceeding visual qualities and sonic qualities. Because what happens? It condenses, it goes to crazy, and then it goes back to sort of cleaning itself up a bit. And it's sort of providing a little bit of more organization, I suppose. So I wanted to make it seem like, in a way, yeah, the video itself was kind of an entity in of itself, and that it could actually screw itself up. It could confuse itself. It's like, hey, everything was working fine, everything's working fine, alright, we're going good. Oh, crap, I screwed everything up. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and give it this quality, and I'm going to see what you say about it. This video is ADD. Let me elaborate a little bit on that. When I say that the video can screw itself up, well, the person who has ADD screws themselves up, but it's the brain that's doing it. It's just that the brain happens to also be part of them. And it is therefore screwing itself up. It's tweaking itself. It's like it's trying to provide order to itself in the midst of its own chaos. It is chaotic and orderly all at the same time, and it's like both of the forces are fighting against it. I don't know. I mean, that's why I use analogies, and that's probably why I'm using this video as a form of that. I don't know. I have noticed that, though, that my creativity comes in the form of analogies. When that scan phasing, when the white bar goes down or up or whatever, there are actually points that I didn't notice until the final cut. Like, what is it? Time frame is it? At a minute 43, when it scans over her, when she's walking towards the Russian dude on the bed. And I actually put this in there because because following it is when her bra is sparking. I put this stuff in there on purpose. It kind of provided something of a brief transition from other things. Because I did notice that there are times where I had to actually make filler. When I was plopping things in there, I was like, I need to lead up to that somehow. And so, in a lot of cases, there are lead-ups. And, because, that's kind of common anyway in how videos work. Videos usually progress in a chronological fashion. But at a minute 43, when she's walking up there, and there's a close-up of her face, and she's got those big glasses on, and I think the reason there's a close-up of it is because the name of the glasses, I can't read them because of the quality of effects that I use, but the bar passes across her lipstick, and her lips hover in midair because of all of the other white. That's just, that scan phasing thing just completely whites it out, except for certain dark things, which is really weird. And so it kind of added an interesting effect to some cases where, when she's dancing in the big white areas and she's in her white outfits, sometimes her hands are just floating in midair. So that effect alone added some really cool coincidences. One being the one at, bam, a minute 44, when it lands right on her tits, they explode, and it all disappears. I really do like the blood red outfits. Yeah, I had to add the cat meow because that was just cool. I felt because that little piece, that little female exclamation, was not part of her video, I had to figure out something that was just about as long, and I was like, it kind of sounds a little sexual, and so I thought, but at the same time it sounds a little, maybe, I guess, it sounded girly and maybe a little aggressive, and I was like, at some point, I'm sure I came up with the word catty, and I was like, hey, there's a cat in the video. It's really brief, it has nothing else to do with anything else in the entire video, might as well just throw that in there. The bed was on fire, and then she pops up. That was coincidental. There were frames that I had to edit out so that didn't, because strangely enough, and I don't know how other people see this, but I've been able to notice spare frames that show up when I'm watching videos. So, in the Alejandro video specifically, although that's an 8 minute 46 second video, something like that, it's 8 minutes and 40 seconds long, there's a point where I saw, and I had no clue I was ever going to see this, there's just a spot. It's a brief spot where she's like sitting there and the rosary is already in her mouth and she looks kind of dead. And I was like, wait, what the fuck did I just see? And so I scanned back and I was like, there it is again, what the hell? So, because at the time I didn't have the video editor and I didn't have the downloader and all that, I had to like hit the play pause over and over and over again just to hit that one little spot. And I'm like, oh my god, it's actually there. I did see what I saw. I mean, I've been noticing all sorts of weird visual anomalies, and when I've been doing all of this video editing, the first video that I really edited was, in fact, my version of the Alejandro video. I took her song and said, okay, let's make this fucker normal length. And that's the first video I did real editing on. It's on my list somewhere. But when I'm watching these final edits, I'm noticing like spare frames just kind of pop out real quick, and I'm like, oh crap, now I gotta go back in there and fix it. But it makes it clean. I don't think anybody else notices them because they're not there. So, I don't know, maybe that's a special talent of mine or something, I don't know.